You're only focused on the card I gave you. And so when I changed the context, many of you didn't notice. I gave you a problem to solve, and you performed brilliantly, with a few exceptions. You performed brilliantly, you did. But in so doing, you ignored the context. When I shifted the context, many of you didn't notice. And friends, this is what aimlessness can do to us. We become so fixated on doing the things we've been tasked with doing, we stop asking, why am I doing this? Which is why we can easily succeed our way into failure if our work and our strategies and our organizational principles aren't tied into something deeper. So, in the face of uncertainty, we have to have a point of view. We have to have something that's driving our work, our decision making, and we have to be able to tie every decision we make back to that point. We swim in noise. He said noise becomes data when it achieves a cognitive pattern. So once there's something somewhat meaningful to it, then it becomes data. But data itself is not very useful. Data becomes information when it's combined with other data in a way that actually gives us some bit of information that we can act upon in some way. And information becomes knowledge when combined with other information in a way that allows us to act meaningfully. And knowledge becomes understanding when knowledge combines with other knowledge in a way that allows us to predict. So we can begin to predict where we should go, the decisions that we should make. But he said that's not where it ends. That's where a lot of people stop the chain. But he said understanding becomes wisdom when guided by purpose, by principles, by ethics. See, understanding is what can we do. Wisdom is what should we do. So I want to give you a couple of ways to do that, right? We have to fill our minds with valuable stimuli. We have to train ourselves to think deeply about issues, put valuable things into our head. We have to fill our well. Do you have time on your calendar dedicated to filling your well, to inspiring yourself, to taking in what's going on in the world, to challenging yourself to think deeply, to connecting dots, to communing with great minds, as Stephen Sample from USC called it? Do you have time? And by the way, I'm not saying like, oh yeah, I listen to podcasts on my way to work. I mean, that's fine as somebody who has a podcast. I love that. Thank you. That's great. But I'm talking about dedicated, deep thought time. Where are the brilliant ideas going to come from, friends? They're going to come from that dedicated, deep thought time where you're synthesizing. Leaders are the chief dot connector. If you are not taking time to connect dots in your world, if you're not taking time to fill your well, to synthesize, game off. The third deadly sin is comfort. Comfort. Comfort is when, frankly, we begin to settle in. There are a lot of people who believe that comfort is the goal of life. But I believe that the love of comfort is frequently the enemy of greatness in organizations and in individuals. You cannot pursue comfort and great work at the same time. You can't. Now, you can experience comfort as you're pursuing great work. I mean, that happens sometimes. And we're not sitting in intentionally spiky chairs right now just because we want to be uncomfortable. It'd be silly to do that. You can experience comfort, but you can't chase comfort because sometimes you have to choose to do the uncomfortable thing, even when it's the right thing. One of the most important things we can do as leaders of others is to discuss true risk to dispel perceived risk. So when you make a bold decision, have a conversation. Hey, before we leave this room, let's talk about this right now. What are we afraid might happen if we actually take this course? Let's talk about what we're afraid of. Let's talk about all of the potential consequences of this decision. And some of them you'll probably say, that's a very real consequence. That could very well happen, and that's fine. But some of them you'll find your team artificially escalating the perceived consequences of failure. And also, and we've heard this a million times, but also redefining what failure looks like for your team. Because failure isn't always failure if it helps you get where you want to be long term. Failure is only failure if it's something you just sort of sweep under the rug and move on from, but you don't learn from, you don't apply it to future endeavors. So discuss true risk to dispel perceived risk. So when we talk about passion, what we're talking about is the thing that you are willing to spend yourself on behalf of. What is the thing that you care so much about? You're willing, if necessary, to suffer to see it happen because the outcome matters more to you than your temporary suffering. That's what productive passion is for you, and that's what it is for your organization.